its approval of a plan to have the military take charge of Gaza City. On Wall Street this morning, the rally continues. Right now, the Dow is up 233 points, while the Nasdaq ahead 161. More details, srnnews.com.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher. You work hard, you build wisely, your home has become one of your greatest assets. If you're staying put this summer, this might be the perfect time to put that equity to work, whether it's funding a second home, helping your kids get their start, or simply creating more margin in your financial life. Mike and Brian at Fellowship Home Loans are the only ones I trust to guide you through it. They've done loans for my family. They tailor every loan to fit your goals. Fellowship is a direct lender and operates with your best interest in mind. If you're looking to access your equity through a refi or exploring a HELOC for some cash this summer for a second property, or maybe tackle those updates you've been putting off, start with people you trust, people I trust. Go to fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, fellowshiphomeloans.com/Mike G, or call 800-510-MIKE, 800-510-6453. Fellowship Home Loans, mortgage lending by the book.
Nationwide Mortgage Bankers, DBA Fellowship Home Loans, Equal Housing Lender, NMLS number 819382.
The following program is a paid advertisement and does not necessarily represent the views, opinions, or endorsements of Signal Hill Media Partners, its affiliate stations, or its advertisers.
Say what you want.
Welcome to We're Just Sayin' with Senator Vickie Sawyer and co-host David Coble. Join them each week as they provide the latest updates on legislation affecting North Carolina, from breaking down key bills to answering your live call-in questions. Senator Sawyer and David engage in meaningful conversations on the issues that matter most to our state. No matter your political affiliation, We're Just Sayin' keeps you informed and involved in the efforts to make North Carolina a better place for everyone. Welcome to the conversation.
Good morning, everyone. You're listening to We're Just Saying on, lots of different stations with Senator Vickie Sawyer and David. Logic part of the show, 704-873-9929. However, today is I'm Just Saying because the good senator is out of the country celebrating her birthday. And Billy, her 50th birthday is today, so happy birthday, Senator Vickie Sawyer.
We were wondering earlier this morning what the age was. We weren't going to
it's
say.
The big 50. She is out celebrating her 50 years of life on this earth, her 5 decades of living, her half century of being in the world.
Keep pushing. Keep pushing.
What? No, I'm just saying. I mean, it's a big milestone. Half a century.
It is.
I mean, I'm not there yet. It's in your rearview mirror just a little bit, not by much.
Okay.
But happy birthday to Senator Sawyer. She is, of course, celebrating and hopefully enjoying herself greatly. So my co-pilot seat is empty, but the engineer seat with Billy in it. We're going to hold this down later today in the show. We're going to have Senator Todd Johnson from Union County joining us, talk about some things that are going on in Raleigh. And Vickie did have an excused absence. I do want to make sure that we understand that she's not ditching out her constituents, as it were. She did have an excused absence from Raleigh. But Billy, it was interesting to me because anytime there's big milestones and stuff like that, I like to look back on what was going on the day you were born. Right?
Oh my gosh.
And so do you was there off the top of your head, do you remember any, well, obviously you're not going to remember it, but you know of any major event that happened the day you were born?
Well, that was, get ready for it, 1958.
Okay.
So I think Eisenhower was still president, and we just had finished the Korean conflict. But I can't remember right off the top of my head any of the other things that happened. I can go back and look.
Yeah.
But milestones, as far as I go, is no, I don't remember.
Yeah. How
about you?
So I have an interesting birthday. So on the day I was born, so every 4 years we celebrate my birthday by inaugurating a president.
Oh, okay.
My birthday is January 20th. So on the day I was born, Jimmy Carter was inaugurated.
Amen.
Yep, exactly. And so, but yeah, every 4 years I get to point to celebrate my birthday by inaugurating a president. Obviously, I think they did that with me in mind. Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm going with anyway.
Right.
But it's interesting because I was looking back on some major milestones the day that Senator Vickie Sawyer was born.
Oh,
And there wasn't a lot happening that day,
right.
to be fair. I mean, you can't have something major going on every single day. But I did find something interesting on the day that Senator Sawyer was born. Hank Williams Jr. fell off Ajax Peak in Montana.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, so Bocephus fell off the mountain, major injuries, had to have
Yes.
face reconstruction. Obviously, that wasn't her fault.
No.
She wasn't anywhere near it, obviously, but major event that happened on her birthday. But I was just like, let's see. So was there anything major that happened when Vickie was 10 years old? Right.
Okay,
So 40
all right.
years ago.
Yeah.
So Japan selected their first astronauts on her 10th birthday,
Oh.
and Major League Baseball officially expanded.
Oh, yeah, really?
Yeah,
Okay.
really, absolutely. Now, when she was 20, and I'm doing this specifically to put perspective on, her
Yes.
seasoned, her seasoning, as it were, in her
Yes.
age.
Yes.
When she was 20, Netscape went public.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you remember Netscape Navigator?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, most people
Yeah,
don't. If you
Yep.
weren't, in your teenage years in the 90s, then you probably don't remember Netscape.
That's right.
But they were the competitor to Microsoft Internet Explorer.
Right.
Didn't last long.
Nope.
Didn't make it long. But they went public at $28 a share.
Yes.
And by the end of that day, they were up to $75 a share.
Is that right?
Yep.
I
So
didn't
some people
realize.
made a lot of money, not me.
Yes, sir.
And then also on that day, Iraq officially acknowledged that they had a bioweapons program.
Really?
Yep, that was the day that they
20
admitted.
years ago?
No, that would
That
be
was-
in 30 years. No,
Yeah,
20. Yeah.
Wow.
So that was and then 10 or 20 years ago. That was 30 years ago. 20 years
Okay.
ago, Peter Jennings died on her birthday.
Yes. Yeah.
So again, not her fault. And then 10 years ago, not a whole lot happened 10 years ago. A major typhoon did hit China and Taiwan.
Okay.
So she has seen a number of historic events on her birthday. I think Hank's the most significant out of all of those. I mean,
Probably so.
astronauts are cool and everything like that, but I mean, it doesn't get any better than Bocephus.
Oh, absolutely.
It really doesn't. Now, have you ever seen Bocephus live in concert?
One time, and that was years ago in Nashville.
Really?
During it used to have a thing called the Country Radio Seminar,
Oh,
and that's been replaced by something else. But all the radio people would go, and you'd get to meet the stars, and you take your cassette recorder, and you go around to the different booths and get them to go, "Hi, I'm Hank Jr. on W whatever it is." you know.
Really?
Yeah, and you do all
see, now
that
that's
stuff.
cool. And
Yeah.
you'd have to pay him for that?
No, they were just pleased that you would have.
I guess they were less greedy back then. right?
Record companies were very happy to have you talk about their artist on the air.
Now, while I'm thinking about what station did you start on?
I started here when it was an FM.
Okay.
I think we got our caller here.
Oh,
for
do
a
we?
second. I think so.
Do
Try
we
it,
have
see.
Senator Todd Johnson?
Hey, what's happening?
Senator Johnson, how are you today?
I'm doing great. You doing okay?
Doing great. Billy and I were just sitting here talking. Obviously, the good Senator Vickie is not around. She's also celebrating her half-century birthday over across the pond. And so we were just talking about some of the major historical things that had happened on her birthday through the years. And we were just talking about the fact on the day she was born, Hank Jr. fell off Ajax Point in Montana.
Oh well, these are very pivotal things that's happened in our history.
They are. They absolutely are. I mean, commemorating her birthday in this way, I think, is essential. It's also good to remind people just how far back she goes.
Yeah, she's a legend. I'll tell you. She's definitely a legend.
And I'm thinking that there's probably a fairly good chance I'm going to pay dearly for this when she returns, but that's okay.
It's going to be severe payback.
It is going to be severe payback, but right now I'm controlling the mic, so I get to say what I want. But really thankful. Thank you.
When the cat's away, the mice play. That's how it works.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. But I'd like to think, given her age and seasoning, that she'll be mature about it. Don't you? Do you think she'll be graceful and forgiving about it?
I'm certain.
Well, I really do appreciate the time. So, one of the things I wanted to talk with you about is obviously it's veto override season. You guys had some last week. I think you had a couple this week. And so wanted to bring you on to sort of talk about what happened in Raleigh. Normally, Vickie gives us that, fill in. But obviously, there were some veto overrides over the last couple of weeks. And one of the infamous mini budgets was passed. So, over the course of the last week, when we look at the vetoes that you all did, what were some of the ones that you were really focused on? I mean, obviously you were probably happy you overrode all of them, but were there some specific bills that you were really interested in making sure you overrode Governor Stein's veto on?
Sure. Well, as just kind of more from a higher level, we did have 14 total vetoes that we were going to attempt to override. 7 that originated in the Senate, 7 that originated in the House. And so when we all come in on July the 29th, we were looking at a total of 14 overrides. And so from that, I felt pretty good that we were able to get eight of the 14 overridden in both chambers. And why I think that's important is in the Senate, Senator Sawyer and myself, we're fortunate enough to have a supermajority. So overriding vetoes in the Senate is not as large of an uphill climb. It's still difficult when you're overriding the executive branch, but we were able to override all of the 7 that started in ours, and then also override 3 of the ones that the House sent over. So the total that we were able to get across the finish line, there was 8 out of the 14. Now, when you look at of those, all of them I think are very important. I mean, you're anywhere from dealing with the state auditor, and that position is raised based on some of the responsibilities and duties that office now has, making sure the state auditor has the resources and the ability to protect our elections, to do a number of things to make sure we keep things in the state straight. And so I know that Senator Sawyer, just by the nature of her being in office, as well as myself, have heard a slew of folks talking about election integrity going back to 2016, 2020, and even 2024. So we wanted to make sure that the state auditor had the tools necessary to make sure that our elections were protected. So that was a really big one. Also, the Power Bill Reduction Act. If you look at the state of North Carolina and the future vibrancy of our state's economy is simply going to be dependent on power, the accessibility to power, the availability of power, and the cost of power. And so putting ourselves in a position to be able to continue the growth of our economy in our state and continue to be the place that people want to go. As technologies improve, more and more energy is needed. So I would almost say we may have been a few years behind in getting this done, but in the end, I think being able to override that is going to be beneficial, not only to the state's economy, but also to the consumers of our state. Obviously, those 2 are very big. Now, we weren't able to get some of the DEI stuff over the finish line. Now, the Senate, we were able to override, couldn't quite get it across the finish line in the House. But still, I think this is something we really need to continue to work on. Letting everyone know, just because it didn't come up July the 29th in the House, that doesn't mean it's dead. I mean, we have until December the 31st of next year. So you've got another however many months before that's actually going to not be eligible at that point in time. So it's never really dead at the General Assembly. And also the one that a lot of folks are at least based on the feedback that our offices received, Senate Bill 50, which is the constitutional carry bill. We did override it in the Senate. It did not come up for a vote in the House, and that tells me that the Speaker, who is a very intelligent politician and public servant, knew he didn't quite have the vote. So I fully expect to be some more work done in that space. Charter school changes, just a number of different things that we've done. Of course, the big thing on folks' mind is our southern border and what's North Carolina doing to protect our borders, to make sure that folks can come here. And we don't mind folks coming here. We actually like people to come to our state. I think we've got a great product here where people want to live here. We just want to make sure they're here legally. And when they get here, we want to make sure they want to be productive citizens and not here for nefarious reasons. So big legislation. We've done some heavy lifting this session. Very proud of the the General Assembly and what we've been able to accomplish. But at the same time, I know there's some bills that did not get across the finish line. So I wanted to take up for my friends in the House and just remind everyone that the House does not have a supermajority. So there has to be a lot of negotiating across the aisle, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But they're working through that, and I have all the faith in the world in the Speaker that he'll be able to get that accomplished before the clock runs out.
No, great. And actually, it was interesting to me as I go through and I look at the bills that the governor vetoed. Some of them are pretty straightforward as to why a Democratic governor would veto them. The bill regarding sheriffs complying with ICE, the male and female under state law recognition that you all did. But one of the things, you mentioned the auditor's ability, really to investigate publicly funded agencies and do his job. Auditors are obviously elected in North Carolina. They, it's not a one party rule doesn't rule that office over the course of a period of time. Any idea why Governor Stein objected to expanding the auditor's ability to hold public agencies accountable?
Well, I really don't understand, and I agree. Some of these overrides were just straightforward, and it's almost to the point where when you ratify the bill that it's not going to be signed, but it's still something we need to do. I don't really understand the rationale, and if I try, I struggle sometimes to figure out what the heck I'm doing. So if I try to figure out why he's doing it, I'm really going to struggle. But I don't know if there was. I don't know if there was outside pressures from D.C., which I fully expect. There was some outside pressures from D.C. North Carolina being a targeted state, both in elections and other areas from the left. Probably just any expansion of his power, and more importantly, what this bill does, it gives him the tools to execute the powers that we've already extended for him. Because it's one thing to give someone the power to do it, but if you don't give them the resources and the availability to execute it, then what was the point of doing it to begin with? So I would assume that there was external pressures coming from D.C. and outside of North Carolina that really pushed that to happen. Again, that's an assumption. I don't know that to be fact, but I would see that as something that in the end is going to prove to be correct, the right way to do it, because it's the right legislation to pass. Simply because you brought up a good point, David. If you remember, this seat has historically been held by the Democrat Party. It's held by the Republican Party now, but we're going to have an election for that seat in the next 2.5 years. It could very well flip back to the other side. And what you see from the General Assembly, I think, at least how I view it and how the discussions go with us, we make decisions based on good policy, not necessarily based on the person that holds the position or the party of the position. We want to make the decision based on good policy. And so this could easily flip back to the other party in the next 2.5 years. Obviously, I hope not. But I think Auditor Bullock's doing a great job. And I think, especially with some of his duties now and responsibilities now that he has the tools necessary, I think he could stay in that position for a while because he's doing a phenomenal job, in my opinion.
Yeah. And one of the interesting things that I know there also, I believe that the approval was granted for the Division of Accountability, Value, and Efficiency, also known as DAVE, which I thought, kind of our own North Carolina state version of Doge, but the acronym DAVE I thought was pretty fantastic, given that Dave Bullock obviously is our auditor. So I'm sure that was just a straight coincidence in the name of that department.
Sure.
When it got passed.
Yeah, sure. It was a coincidence. But here's again, David, that's not a partisan thing. I don't care whether you're left, right, or center. We should all want to hold our elected officials accountable. We should want to make sure, especially in the administrative branch or the bureaucracy, the folks that are not elected, the people that are listening to your show right now do not have the ability to hire and fire. They have the ability to hire and fire Vickie and myself. Every 2 years you're given that opportunity. Within the bureaucracy of these agencies, or the administrative state, as they say, our voters do not have a chance to choose who holds that position. So everyone, left, right, and center, should want to have the ability to make sure these folks are being held accountable and they are doing what's in the best interest of this state and the people it serves. And so I think it's a great. I'm really excited about that legislation,
Yeah.
which is why I mentioned it first.
No, absolutely, 100%. Now, one of the ones that had, I think, a little bit tougher time getting over the finish line was the concealed carry in schools, private schools, for security purpose and things like that. I know you have done a lot of work in the education arena. You're deep inside that education policy and everything like that. Talk to me a little bit about that override. I mean, that one obviously, from a Republican Democrat standpoint, makes all the sense in the world why a Democrat governor would veto that. But talk to me a little bit about that legislation and why it was so critical to get across the finish line and get the veto overridden.
Yep. So we, the number one thing being a parent and being someone who has a kid in public high school now, and I'm fortunate to have been able to have gotten my oldest son over the finish line. Sometimes I wondered if it was going to happen, but
Join the club.
So safety in our schools is a paramount piece of what parents across North Carolina are concerned about. So making sure that when our kids go to these schools, they have the ability that someone is there, making sure that they're being protected, making sure, because what we really, really want to do ultimately is for students, when they go to school, they're there to learn. When teachers go to school, they're there to teach and mentor. Let them focus on that, but then also make sure that they can do it in a safe environment. And that was a harder one to override. But again, I can't. The folks that were on the other side of the aisle that said, you know what, I'm going to put people above party. And they said, we're gonna cross over because this is the right policy for our state. And so you got to. I don't make it a habit of bragging on my friends on the other side of the aisle, but I'll tell you, especially on July the 29th of the year of our Lord 2025, you had a number of Democrats that said, you know what, I'm going to put policy over party, and I'm going to do what's right for our citizens in our state. And when they were able to do that, it gave me a sense of pride because it gave me hope for our state. And that's not necessarily a Democrat thing or a Republican thing, but just basing your decisions based on what's right and not based on what acronym is at the end of your name on your voting ballot.
Definitely. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is why this is sort of key, especially for private schools, is, most public schools, in most counties have, taxpayer funded resource officers. The school will pay a portion of the salary. A city or a county will pay another portion of the salary. Obviously in Iredell County, both Mooresville PD and the Iredell County Sheriff's Department provide those resource officers to protect our schools. But that's not the case with private schools. They have to, fund their own security. And I think a lot of times people maybe get it in their head, private school, hoity-toity rich kids and things like that. Not the case. We have a lot of Christian schools here that are private schools that have, kids going for free, kids, who are getting aid and stuff like that to go to these things. They need to be protected. And a lot of times these are not in traditional school buildings. They're inside churches. They're inside other places. So security for them is just as important, but the resources for them isn't available as it is to public schools. So a bill like this obviously is key in making sure that we're protecting all children, not just those in public, but also those who, whose parents elect to send them to private.
That's right. Well, and I know you use Christian schools. We've got Jewish schools. We've got, I know there's a few Muslim schools around Charlotte. I know there's Greek schools. There's a number of these different private schools. And and you bring up a good point, David, these private schools need to be able to have the ability to protect their students. They need that ability. And so we're hoping that, and again, I think some of the folks on the other side saw the importance of that and were willing to come on board with us. So it's a very important piece of legislation for our state. And I think history will prove that we did the right thing with this.
No, 100%. Another thing that happened this week is Governor Stein did sign, I guess, what we call mini budgets that funded certain aspects of state government. There was funding in there for healthcare, for education, for a number of other things. Actually, one of the things I found interesting was the Jet Zero project for development of an aircraft manufacturing site, which I really think is an exciting opportunity because, big, heavy manufacturing like that, there's not a ton of it in North Carolina. We have, we're getting some more car stuff. But I think a lot of people, don't realize the amazing economic impact that a project like that can have, both on jobs, both on tax revenue. So I was really excited to see that be part of that mini budget and it make it through to be signed.
Yeah, we get asked a lot about budgets and where we at in the budget process. And hey, Republicans control both chambers. If it was only that simple and easy to put a budget together, I mean, you got to remember you're dealing with, not only are you dealing with 170 total members of the General Assembly, you're also dealing with 101 members of a Republican Party in there. And so people come from different ways of life, and not everyone's the same, and not everyone has the same needs. So you take a Union County or an Iredell County, we are a high growth county. And so we look at things a lot differently than, say, a Terrell County, a Lenoir County, Currituck County, eastern counties or western counties that are not high growth. They're looking at things a lot differently. So it's not quite as easy as sitting down, hey, let's bang it out. We're all Republicans here. Let's spend the money. No, everyone has different priorities. And so working together to come around in agreement on a budget is difficult. At the same time, we are fortunate to have what's called a continuing resolution. So the state of North Carolina, we never have to worry about, like in D.C., with quote unquote the government shutting down. We have a continuing resolution in place, so there is a budget that's in place. The state will not shut down. But what we were able to do between the both chambers is, as we're continuing to work on a bigger budget and more comprehensive budget, let's identify what we call must-haves, things that we can agree on, that are time sensitive, that we really need to get focused on now. And that's what you see with House Bill 125, that mini budget that we were able to get ratified and signed by the governor. And it's going to go after the critical things that we have to have right now. And so the system works. It's frustrating. It's one of those things where we wonder, why is it this hard? But at the same time, I tell you, you want it to be this hard to put together, because you want the state battling. You want the General Assembly to really go in there and scrutinize the money we spend, because at the end of the day, it is not my money. It is not Senator Sawyer's money. It's not Speaker or the Pro Tem's money. It is the money of the state, of the citizens of this state. And so making sure that we do that in a responsible way while still addressing the needs and the requirements of the state that we are supposed to do is very critical. So it's a tough process, but I think what you saw with House Bill 125 is the recognition that there's some things that we have to get done. Let's get those taken care of while we continue to work on a larger budget. And we're doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with a couple minutes that we have left, going forward for the rest of the year, obviously one mini budget has gotten through. Is that going to be sort of, you think, the strategery, as it were, for the rest of the year, mini budgets here and there? Or do you think that we'll be able to get to some agreement for a broader based budget to be passed before the end of the year?
Well, David, you've been a good friend of mine for a long time, and I would hope you would look at me as a glass half full kind of guy.
Absolutely.
And so I'm always hopeful that that I am simply waiting on the phone call or the email or the text message from our leadership that says a deal has been struck, because I know the budget writers in the House and I know the budget writers in the Senate, and you will be hard pressed to find finer gentlemen and ladies and gentlemen in this state with that group of people. And so I know that they're working hard, and so I would be shocked. I would be equally shocked whether we didn't get a budget or whether we did get a budget, because I just don't know. My hope is that we can come together on an agreement for a total comprehensive budget within the next few weeks or months. But at the same time, I also know if that's not able to be accomplished, we do have the ability to do the mini budgets, which makes it a little easier. Now, there is some argument to be made that mini budgets are the best way, because you don't get those huge, large omnibus spending bills where stuff gets lost in translation. And I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I'm not saying it does, where stuff can, maybe you kind of get forced to vote on some stuff that you really don't like. So there's an argument on both sides, but in the end, I think a comprehensive budget would be the best option. I would like to see that done. I would not be shocked if we were able to get that accomplished this year.
Awesome. Great. Well, I appreciate the time. And I was actually thinking of you last Sunday. The family and I took our annual beach vacation, headed down to Myrtle Beach, cruised right through Union County on Sunday. And I almost thought about texting you to come in because I've heard so
You
much
should
about
have.
the family lunches and the cooking that goes on in your family. I almost texted to say, hey, why don't we just
Yeah.
pop in to have lunch with you? But I didn't. We went ahead and cruised on through. But one of these days, you're going to get that random text from me because you talk so much
You
about
just
that Sunday
come.
lunch. I'm ready to come and sit down and enjoy it.
Well, you're welcome anytime for sure, David. And I appreciate you letting me be on. And I'm sure that the listeners would have rather had Senator Sawyer, but appreciate
Well,
you
let's not
letting me
go that
hop
far
on
now.
with you
Let's not go that far. You have yourself a great weekend. Senator Todd Johnson from Union
Have-
County, thanks so much for joining us. You're listening to We're Just Saying. We'll be right back.
Bravo, Brenda. You've always been a saver. Price matching your price matches. The self-proclaimed queen of extreme couponing. But this time you've truly outdone yourself. By saving for this electric vehicle, you're locking in up to $1,000 a year in fuel and maintenance savings, which will leave you saying, cha-ching, every time you unplug. Good for your wallet, great for the planet. That's the power of EV. Sponsored by the ANC Clean Energy Technology Center and the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters in cooperation with this station.
We all play a role in keeping our community safe.
Every day, we move in and out of each other's busy lives.
It's easy to take for granted all the little moments that make up our everyday.
Some are good, others not so much.
But that's life.
It's when something doesn't seem quite right that it's time to pay attention.
Because only you know what's not supposed to be in your everyday.
So protect your everyday.
If you see something suspicious, say something to local authorities.
We all want more for North Carolina. More boundless views, more adventures in the outdoors, and more clean roads to get there. But to get more, we have to do less. Less littering, that is. Make it your nature to trash your trash and keep NC clean. And we'll all have more reasons to love North Carolina. Litter less, get more. For more on the 7 outdoor NC Leave No Trace principles, visit OutdoorNC.com. Sponsored by the North Carolina Association of Broadcasters and Visit North Carolina, a part of the Economic Development Partnership of North Carolina in cooperation with this station.
Get ready for a tradition like no other. It's the 89th Annual Old Fiddlers Convention, August 4th through the 9th in beautiful Galax, Virginia at Phelps Park. Hosted by the Galax Moose Lodge 733, this week-long celebration features the best in bluegrass and old-time music, with over $20,000 in cash prizes, trophies, and ribbons waiting to be won. Camp out, jam late, and make memories that last a lifetime. For information, call 276-236-8541 or go to oldfiddlersconvention.com. The Old Fiddlers Convention, where the music lives on and the mountains sing.
Welcome back to We're Just Saying with Senator Vickie, Sawyer, and David. Like to be part of the show, 704-873-9929. Like we started off on the show, the good senator is off celebrating the semi-centennial of her life over in Rome, I believe she's at, so hope she's enjoying it. Yes, I did Google different terms for 50 years before I got here. My favorite now, I didn't realize her Jubilee. Jubilee is 50 years. Yeah. And then there's some Latin term, quinquagenary. What is that? Is that like a derivation of octogenarian?
It probably sounds that way, yes.
Yeah, but she's not an octogenarian yet, right? I mean, that's not 50 years.
That's 80.
Okay,
Yeah,
all right. So it's a
good.
quinquagenary is apparently the Latin term, but her Jubilee is what we'll go with. But
I like that.
Want to thank Senator Todd Johnson from Union County being on with us and talking to us about things that were going on and all. Billy, it's interesting to me. I think that one of the things I love about this show and Senator Sawyer's perspective, and obviously, Senator Johnson calling in, I think, and I was this way before I actually started going down to Raleigh a lot. You really don't have an understanding of how complicated it is down there and how many moving pieces are. Because, as Senator Johnson said, the Republicans control both chambers. And in your mind, you think, well, this should be easy, but it's really not, because you're not just dealing with party dynamics, you're dealing with regional dynamics and, economic dynamics and things like that in different cultures, farming, farming versus, heavy industry and things like that. So, and everybody is looking for investment, taxpayer dollar investment. So balancing all that out is not easy, even if everybody's in the same party.
That's exactly right. And I still don't understand it. So, and I don't think most folks do. But to hear Senator Sawyer talk about, and Jeff McNeely when he comes by, of how you're constantly running and moving to talk to people to get them to understand your point, and they, on the other hand, doing that as well. Then you have the votes, and then so it is quite complicated. You're right.
100%.
So explain it all to us
No,
in simple terms.
Trust me when honestly, I would take Senator Johnson his explanations, but some of Vickie's past explanations, because I would never want to say anything to get in too much trouble. I do that enough as it is.
Yes,
I'm the one that gets in trouble here more than a few times. And actually, so far so good. We got through the first segment. I don't think I've said anything overly controversial.
No, you're good.
You know, but I still got 26 minutes to get through, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. But I really am glad you're here today, Billy, because it's very tough to do this without a partner. It was good to see that after that you came back from your fleeing to Illinois over the Texas gerrymandering issue, which I'm sorry, if you don't believe that there's unintentional comedy in the world, you don't pay attention to politics, because these Democrats from Texas, and they did this before, they did this like 3 years ago.
Right.
And they passed laws to make it more painful. They go to all places of Illinois, one of the worst gerrymandering offenders in all of the state. And it's like, you hope that people look at that and it's like, you wonder if it crosses their mind. Do you embrace the rank hypocrisy of what you're doing? Do you understand how stupid that you look by doing this? You're not impressing anyone. Right. Cory Booker going for 28 hours or whatever, 25 hours or whatever it was on the Senate floor. No one talks about that anymore. Nobody barely remembers it. Only the political junkies even remember it. But, at that individual moment, he thought he had done the greatest thing in the world. And it's like, things like this don't move the needle. It gets you clicks. It gets you shown on the press. It doesn't do any good. Why do you continue to do it? And up to that, they're fined $500 a day now that they're gone, which I think's fantastic.
Well, yeah, if they'll pay it, and it said they will be under arrest when they land.
I think so.
So I mean, will that stick? You just wonder sometimes if they say all this. I'm wondering if they will go through with it.
Well, and therein lies the challenge. And I think you raise a good point with that, because, I think a lot of elected officials, and we've seen it, I think it's more brazen now, because the goal of many elected officials is to simply get on TV, to get on social media, to get clicks, to go viral. We've seen it during the ICE deportation operations and things like that. Right. Elected officials going and standing outside detention facilities, demanding entry, and then assaulting ICE officers like some Democrats did up in New Jersey. You've got a senator from California who busts in on Kristi Noem, I think it was, when she's doing her press conference, and nobody has any clue who he is, so security grabs him and escorts him out. Right? She didn't have a clue who he was.
Right.
And it's all these stunt. Jasmine Crockett has made her, and the congresswoman from Texas, who theory is that she could be drawn out of a district, which would be fantastic, to be fair. I don't know if you saw, they did a full profile on her. There was a big press profile on her, which is what she wants, right?
Sure.
But I think she thought that it was going to be overly friendly to her. And when she found out that they had actually talked to other people, and there's several other people even on her own side of the aisle and among her staff who can't stand her. She called and threatened the reporter and rescinded her permission. It's like, sugar, it doesn't work that way. I'm sorry. The press is going to write what they're going to write. You don't get to rescind their permission, your permission to, because they don't need your permission, right?
Well, I don't know how old you are or how far you remember back, but
I am not in my jubilee yet.
Thank you very much. There was you talk about gerrymandering, and there was the whole big thing. I think it was Mel Watt, and I believe it was District 12, and it was it looked like a snake. It just followed I-85.
And it was Roy Cooper's district, wasn't it?
I believe it was.
Yeah, Roy Cooper's the one who had the most squiggly line district that you've ever seen in your life.
It was crazy. And you're just like, are you kidding me? And literally, well, of course, I guess that's the way it is now. Literally, on the other side of the street is another district from your district. And you're like, okay. I don't understand why they would do this. So actually do a little explanation of why you do gerrymandering.
So, I mean, ultimately, gerrymandering is, for the party who has control of the map, they want to keep control. They want extra congressional seats because that makes it easier for your party to take control at the federal level. So, there is a definite, I guess, self-serving aspect of it. There's been a number of court rulings. North Carolina, if you remember, when we were redrawing our districts, so I mean, couldn't as soon as the ink was dry on the map, they were sued by Eric Holder and everything like that back during the Obama administration, and it goes to court. They file it in friendly courts, and ultimately ends up in the Supreme Court and various places like that. But there are rules around the way these districts have to be drawn. Largely they have to keep counties whole. They have to make sure that there is a certain number of people inside of the district, certain representation, demographic makeup. So it is not an easy thing to draw.
Right.
And generally, and I think if you look at North Carolina's maps, they're largely representative of the district, right? Or of North Carolina. A lot of people, forget that. I think, when it comes to counties versus cities and things like that, Republicans overwhelming win the majority of counties inside of this country.
Yes.
You look at, California, I think, I saw a statistic that, 43% of people in California voted Republican in the last election, but they've only got like 14% of the seats, 17% of the seats. So, and that's drawn by Democrats and has been for years. So Democrats do it, Republicans do it, and ultimately, there is a criteria, but the party in power gets to draw the maps. That's, hey, you know what? If you don't like it, win the elections, convince people otherwise, get in there. But really, I mean, it's about maintaining power. I don't have an issue with it. That's simply the system that we have set up right now. I don't even know how you would draw fairer district. Now the squiggly lines and the fingers, okay, that gets a little ridiculous. But in North Carolina, I really don't think that's the case. If you look at our maps, I think they're largely drawn accurately.
So I can always recall, well, we're in Iredell County. Of course, we cover so many different counties now with this show, but Iredell County, they had chopped up. We had like 5 districts at one point. And I don't know who was in charge way back, but this was quite some time back, and it's slowly but surely has evened out a little bit more.
Yes.
But
Yes.
still, here in Iredell, I can't remember what the district is, but down in the south part of Iredell, there's a little chunk that belongs to whatever the next district is. So anyway,
yeah, and it's one of those things where it's population has a big factor in that,
right?
And again, we're not just talking about drawing federal maps or congressional maps. State maps are the same way. They redraw them at the same time,
right?
And so Senator Sawyer originally in her map, she had Yadkin County and Iredell County, and Iredell County being a more populous county, Yadkin having fewer people, and then when it came time when the courts came back, the democratically led courts came back, Supreme Court said, nope, you got to go back and redraw them. Then she went back and redraw them, and now she has a portion of North Mech and all of Iredell County. The ultimate goal in those states is to keep counties as whole as possible. Now, it's not always easy, just based off, you don't have a set number of people inside of a county, inside of every county to meet the term. So you have to cross over a little bit. But you're right. It is sometimes funny to see that you've got multiple different districts crossing inside of a county. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, North Carolina's mass. But I want to go back to something you said a little bit earlier, because it kind of feeds into the next thing I want to talk about. The threats of arrest, the $500 fines when those people get back. Is that really going to happen? Is it because so many times I think sometimes we think elected officials do a lot of things, but at the end of the day, are they really going to be held accountable and everything like that? And something we're seeing right now with Russiagate has rendered its ugly head again, and now it's game on apparently, because the Obama has been subpoenaed, the Clintons have been subpoenaed, James Comey has been subpoenaed. I mean, there are subpoenas going left and right to people who were involved in the Russia hoax, and there's been enough documentation and enough news reporting finally to say that yes, this was a hoax. It was a concerted effort to try to undermine an election, to undermine President Trump, to paint him in a way that was completely false. And so I actually am happy to see that there's some accountability to this. The challenge I have with it is I think the mainstream media will do its job to Republican overreach. And that's
Mm.
generally what we hear when
Mhm.
Republicans do that. It's Republican overreach. There's no there. Nothing happened. And the effort to muddy the waters just enough. But wouldn't you love just one time to see, Hillary Clinton have to go before Congress, raise her right hand and talk about this, and Slick Willie, her husband, have to raise his hand. And now I think a lot of them have agreed to closed door depositions and things. But honestly, it'd make for great TV. It really would, just to see what that questioning looked like.
Yeah. I just don't know that a former president would actually be put in prison.
No, and I think even Trump said that. Even if Obama called in the intelligence community and said make this up in any way, shape, or form, he's not subject to. He can't be put into jail. The president can't. The Supreme Court has made it pretty clear in reference to Trump. Has pretty much set the precedent that a sitting president cannot be, indicted or prosecuted for what they do in the official capacity of their job. And I think that's right. I think whether it's Republican or whether it's Democrat, I appreciate that, because I do feel like that if a president could be prosecuted, it would be, and you've seen it with Trump when he was out of office, it would be constant lawsuits. It would be paralysis inside the executive branch. There would be absolutely no way in the world to get anything done because the opposing party would be filing lawsuits all the time.
I think you're probably right. Now, Hillary, on the other hand, she was a vice president, was she not?
Well, no, she was Secretary of State.
That's right.
So she can be prosecuted.
I was going to say
she can be, but is anybody brave enough to prosecute Clinton? That's dangerous. I mean, you don't want to get Epstein, and prosecuting a Clinton brings its own set of challenges, Billy.
Well, a lot of people were suicided back then.
Yes.
So you do wonder. I don't know that you want to touch on Epstein.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
I don't even want to go there. I think that, what I will say is it is horrible what he did. I hate that he never got fully prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I think that would have been something. I do think that there's a lot of powerful people behind that. And I'm not saying that that's motivating anything that's going on right now. I do think we will eventually see those files, but I think protecting the victims is paramount in that situation. You do not want the names of his victims released and things like that, because that's attacking them all over again and putting them through that again. I do think there's a way that this can be done and should be done, and I'm hopeful that it'll happen. I really do. It's interesting to me the Democrats are trying to call foul when they had 4 years plus that they could have, they controlled both houses, right? They controlled the executive branch, they controlled the House, they controlled the Senate. They easily could have, gotten that done, never even came up on their radar. So, just sit, maybe sit this one out, Democrats, especially because, Epstein was one. So maybe don't get into that. But one thing I did want to touch on at the state level before we kind of do a couple of local things, Judge Jefferson Griffin, who had run for Superior Court, I believe it was Superior Court. I always get Court of Appeals and Superior Court mixed up, but either way, it's one of those. I'm sure someone will there. We have a resident fact checker that listens to our show that texts me the things that I get wrong, and there seems to be more and more frequent these days. But if you remember, he had contested his election and some results. He only lost by, I think it was 700 and some odd votes.
Right.
And he had raised several different issues with votes that had come in without proper identification, that they had come in late and things like that. What's interesting is that through the court system, even though he conceded the election and sort of withdrew, through investigation at the Board of Elections, they've basically proven that all three of his issues that he raised with the ballots that had come in were actually correct. And so the state Board of Elections has actually voted to remedy those things and correct that issue. But I find it, I don't know if it's lesser compensation, right? It's a bitter pill to swallow that, after conceding everything that you were proven right. But I think we talked about during the time, it's very tough to sue your way into, overturning an election. Right. It just is. I mean, it's just difficult in this day and age. But it is interesting that his objections were actually noted to be correct, and the Board of Elections has voted to remedy those.
And, you go back to Bush and Gore. And Gore called, I don't know if it was official, but he called Bush and said, I concede and you've won and that's it. And then a little while later, he calls back, I'll take it back.
Yeah, exactly. Let's put a pin in that. Spoke too soon. Well, and a lot of people, refer back to Richard Nixon, when Richard Nixon barely lost, Illinois to JFK. And I think, based off what has come out since then, it's basically widespread, accepted that there was a lot of voter fraud in Illinois that delivered that state for John F. Kennedy. And I actually listened. I love audiobooks, and I listened to a book on the presidents, and it talked good bit about that election and Nixon. And he had people that were telling him to fight it at the time, and there was plenty of evidence to suggest it. But he took a higher road. He put country first, and I appreciate that. At that level. I mean, obviously, we've since known through multiple investigations that Florida was handled. Bush did win Florida. Some people still try to claim the Supreme Court gave to him. Nope, he did win it. Independent analysis has confirmed that. But you run, and I give a little bit of sympathy to these presidential candidates. They put their heart, their soul, hundreds of millions of dollars in and time away from family and stuff like that to run for this office, and then for it to appear like there could be irregularities, voter fraud, what have you, to have to swallow that's not an easy thing for any person to swallow. So I do have sympathy for that. I really do.
I will go back, and before you get to this next one here, I can recall I voted for Jimmy Carter.
Really?
I did.
On the day of my birth.
Yeah, on the day of your birth, I was voting. I voted for Jimmy Carter. But you know why I voted for him?
Why?
The only reason I voted for him was because he was from the South.
Yeah.
I was young, and I didn't know anything about him. In hindsight, you got all that, but that was my primary reason for voting for him. Oh, he's a Southern guy. He's going to do good. And I wonder if that carries over to today. It's a lot different today, but young people are voting. I don't know if they really know what they're voting for.
I think that's fair. And I think we see that a little of that playing out in New York with the communist that won the Democratic nomination up there. Democratic socialist, I call it communism, but whatever. But I think that we do, because I think younger people right now I think they look at things and they don't spend a lot of time researching these things, diving into details. They're not watching Peter Jennings and Ted Koppel or Walter Cronkite in the evenings like we did, right? I mean, there were 3 channels when I was growing up for a long time. You watched the news, you got the news, and you could dig into a little bit more. Now, today, there's so much competing for young people. And I think they look at things a lot as, and I see it with my own kids when we talk politics, it is very much of, well, that just seems like the right thing to do. That just seems like the kind thing to do.
Right.
I think it's a very moral compass they look at. And I think when they look at candidates like, Zarmani, I think it's Zarmani up in New York. He says, hey, we want grocery stores that basically have free food. Well, why shouldn't we have that? That sounds great. There's people that need that food and everything like that. And they haven't had the opportunity to deal the next level and haven't researched history enough to understand how damaging that is across every country that's ever tried it. That's not something that's taught readily in schools anymore. When we were taught, the Soviet Union was still going full board, and we were highly educated on the problems with communism, both economically, militarily, morally, and things like that. I don't think they get a whole lot of that this day. I think it's a little bit more philosophical, not a lot of application. But I agree with you. I think that I don't think they realize a lot of those things going in. But before we get out of here, a little bit of local news. Billy, do you have 400 acres you can stick this data center now and down in Mooresville if it doesn't make it through?
Gosh, no, I think I have about 5. I don't think that would handle it.
I don't think that's going to make it. I honestly don't think that's going to make it. But I mean, have you been following the story on the data center? I mean, it's a hot topic across social media and things like that. The Mooresville board set the hearing date, I believe September 15th is when that's going to be. And so, this is it's been a major story down in Mooresville. These data centers, though, across the country are starting to get, a little more controversial. And I understand why. There's concerns about them. I mean, the amount of water that they take, noise for generators, things like that. Power consumption, absolutely. And so, but it's one of those things that I think a lot of people, especially people that live around them or could potentially live around them. Obviously, they don't want them, and I completely understand and respect that. But I think one of the things that I've noted is I think a lot of people don't look at it from the elected official side when you talk about the tax revenue that can potentially come from these things. I mean, they're huge. They're absolutely huge amounts of tax revenue that come from it. And an elected official has to take that into consideration. right? And I think that's something that is important, and I commend the Mooresville Town Council. I've had the opportunity to speak with several of them. They are doing their homework. They are doing their due diligence. They want to get this right. A lot of claims are made about data centers, about, power consumption, about water and something like that. So it takes some time to dig in and say, okay, is that a legitimate concern? Noise. I think the mayor of Mooresville actually, I think, went to a data center with a decibel meter over in Catawba County. Say, hey, what kind of noise are we talking about here? Because it's one thing to Google why are data centers evil, right? And then repost that and say, this is why this shouldn't be here. One doesn't have anything to do with the other. The centers are different. The land is different. The opportunities are different. The power capabilities are different. So much is different each one. And to do the appropriate research in this is a complicated thing. This isn't just a residential development, right? I mean, this is a big, huge data center with a lot that goes into it. So homework is needed on that. I commend commissioners for taking their time to look into this and actually get it right.
It's funny because it just Tucson City Council rejects Project Blue Data Center amid intense community pressure.
So
there you are.
Yeah, and I think elected officials are elected to serve their constituency, and so that is something that is important. It has to be taken into account. I did have a discussion, of course, this week. I fell off the social media wagon. Typically, I avoid getting involved in social media discussions. I did get on one about the data center today or this week, and really kept it confined to elected officials. Something we talked about on the show before is calling elected officials corrupt, calling them on the take, saying that they've already made their decision, they're going to ignore us, and attacking them personally never gets you where you want to go. It may make you feel good. It may make you maybe some cathartic reason if this does ultimately pass as to why you think it did. It does not help you. If there's a commissioner that's on the fence, and I speak as a commissioner, if there's someone on the fence that says, I'm not sure which way to go on this, I've listened to both sides, go in there and attacking them personally. I mean, don't be surprised if you attack an elected official personally if they take it personal.
How about that?
And that might be something to look at and say, you know what, I can't really decide, but you know what, because I'm getting lambasted here for no good reason. You know what, I'm going to go the other way on this. I'm going to vote yes. And I have seen that happen. On things, people were criticizing me for saying that, but it's just the truth. Elected officials are human beings, and they have feelings. They have feelings and things like that. And right. Yeah. And so they want to do what's right for the community. And there are a number of issues that are not cut and dry. They are not black and white. Yeah. And if the greatest detriment to an opposition to an issue with elected officials is the opposition itself. They are the greatest detriment to themselves because some people just can't help themselves. And so, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens with this. If you were sitting, Billy, on the Mooresville City Council, which way would you vote on this?
Well, the thing I was getting ready to say is that this land is currently being controlled by Teresa Earnhardt.
And that's added a whole other layer, hasn't it?
That's a detriment right there.
Yes.
It's not council.
She is not a popular person around here.
It is her. So you do it. I think that maybe play a little bit into it. Seriously, yeah. I think that may go to part of it. But anyway, certainly Dale Jr. and the other children have voiced their opinions of the whole thing. But that would be a tough one because that data center is jobs. That data center is tax. Mm-hmm. Holy moly, that would be.
Let me give you an interesting statistic. I was reading through some information on this. The tax revenue, the data center itself wasn't going to be inside the Mooresville Graded School District. The tax revenue that comes from that on the Mooresville City School Tax, I believe the number was enough for a $6,800 a year increase in the local supplement to a teacher.
Wow, really?
That's the kind of tax revenue we're talking about. So anyone who thinks an elected official shouldn't be looking at that and taking that into consideration, you don't get it.
Yeah.
I mean, because that is significant. We talk about paying our teachers more and stuff like that. That's the kind of stuff, that kind of tax revenue. Now, is that a sole determining factor? No. But that is something these commissioners have to look at, and the economic impact of these things.
That's exactly right.
Yep.
It's been a great half hour.
It has been a great half hour, but one quick note. I'd noticed, I read an article this week. Guess what has reappeared at the Alamo?
Don't know.
So do you remember, speaking of, people who are older like me, not as old as Senator Sawyer, let's just remind people of that. Do you remember the movie Pee-wee's Big Adventure?
Yes.
Do you remember where he was headed to try to find his bike?
to the basement.
Basement of the Alamo, right? Well, there is no basement, as poor Pee Wee found out, but his bike has reappeared at the Alamo. It was purchased and is now on display at the Alamo.
Are
not
you
in the basement.
serious?
I'm serious. And I'm so disappointed because I was actually in San Antonio a couple of months ago, and we went out to look at the Alamo, and I was there. It was a group of us
Right.
at a conference, several of them much younger than me. And when we get out there, I made this, as we were walking, I said, I wonder if we'll get to see the basement. No recognition whatsoever. Nothing. Absolutely not. But we got there. The park police guy was there, and I walked up to him and I said, can I see the basement? And he kind of just gave me this look. He goes, ha, 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 ha. There is those. So
right.
obviously I was not going to be the first one to make that joke. But yes, if you are interested and going to be in San Antonio this weekend or in the next couple of weeks, go to the Alamo and see Pee Wee's bike. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Senator Sawyer will be back next week. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning in to We're Just Saying with Senator Vickie Sawyer and co-host David Coble. We appreciate your time and input as we discuss the issues shaping North Carolina. Stay informed, stay engaged, and we look forward to having you join us again next week for more updates and insightful conversations. Take care and keep participating in the conversation.